Welcome back to another episode of the Acastus Knight Asterius. I'm Brian the Builder, and in today's episode, I am going to be building up the right arm. So I've got the parts that I previously 3D printed here, and these four pieces are from Wattcorp Designs as part of the Scythe kit. So it's going to be replaced with basically the Warhammer. And the more I look at this, like the end of this, where there is quite a bit of issue that would need cleanup due to filament printing. The overall piece is great. I love it. But the amount of cleanup there, I kind of feel like it'll be kind of a cool project to rebuild this in 3ds Max with the idea of resin printing and the idea of trying to build this in such a way that this whole end is hollow. So I'm going to try to create this as my own model kit. I also have slightly better skulls, right, based on this. I can get a little more detail into that skull. This is great. It's just a little soft. So I'm going to create something like this that will end up having multiple pieces that will be assembled into the final hammer to hopefully keep the whole thing relatively light, because it should be far more hollow than this. So that's the goal. So I'll be jumping into 3ds Max to recreate this, and then while it's printing, I'll be assembling the gauntlet. So that needs to be kind of removed from the little screw bits in there and cleaned up. So I'll get that going while the 3D print is happening. And then we'll be assembling all these parts and getting everything magnetized. I did get new magnets, so there are going to be, there is going to be another video separately of me removing and then replacing those magnets. But this arm, the top of it will be good with the magnet it has, but the shoulder piece, that was the little tiny magnet. The issue is that it doesn't quite, one of the issues, it's kind of a small magnet for what it needs to do, and it doesn't quite go to the surface, so there's no physical contact with any other magnet that could go in there. And the lack of physical contact is really a big part of the issue. Same with this one here. It's slightly recessed and it's kind of small for what it needs to do. So this one is going to be basically the whole nub here is going to be cut off and replaced with a much larger magnet. And really, the pull force on magnets kind of requires that they have physical contact. Even the just half a millimeter even gap there is enough to reduce the pull force between the magnets significantly. So a little bit of redo there, but really the main part that we're going to be worrying about is recreating the Warhammer in 3ds Max and then 3D printing that. And then we'll build up all of our parts and get this guy all set up. And then we're going to be doing a whole lot of painting before we get the armor going. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing I want to do when I get into 3ds Max, before I do anything else, is just double check to make sure that my units are set up correctly for 3D printing. So the first thing I've done is gone into the customize menu, then to unit setup, and then I click on the big old system unit setup button here. Depending on the software you're using, that could be different. For me, making sure that this system unit setup is actually in millimeters is the important part of all of it. So I make sure that's millimeters. then this is just what 3ds Max shows me on the screen. So now I can work in metric or US standard depending on how I like to work. And then in the background it's still in millimeters, so then when I go into my 3D software that also works in millimeters, which is Chi2Box, and I'm looking at Lychee, but at this point I know Chi2Box better, so I might be kind of messing around with Lychee as I go to print this. So we'll see. I'm not really sure. Haven't messed with it enough to really feel like I'd get a successful print using it. But as a slicer, it seems good. I guess Chi2Box I've only had slightly more experience with, so we'll see what happens. Either way, this is going to get printed. So, okay, that's my unit setup. Hit OK. Now, I want to set up some very basic objects in 3ds Max to start with, more as just kind of reference objects more than anything. So, to just give me some kind of simple overall pieces to begin with. Alright, so I know the cylinder where it connects into the other handle piece has to be a 6mm diameter, which means a 3mm radius. So, and then the overall length of the kind of original piece that Adam made is, let's see, approximately 80 millimeters. So I'm just going to make this 80 millimeters tall. I also know the hammer portion is about 45 millimeters across. So we're going to make another cylinder from the side. That's 45 millimeters tall. And what's my diameter here? Diameter here is about 20 millimeters. So then the radius, this is pretty close, would be 10. And then we are just going to center that. What's the height? 45. So it should be at a negative 22.5. And that should put it pretty much in the center. And then I just want to move it up to the top because that really should be about the limit of where the top is. So based on everything we have from Adam, that is our super basic proportions of where we want, this to pretty much be at the end of this. So now it's a matter of taking this and just kind of building up a whole bunch of similar things to what Adam has in here, because I really do love the overall design. So I just really want a cleaner print that's going to require less cleanup. Well, actually, with this, it'll require essentially no cleanup, which is far, far better. And then it'll be completely hollow and hopefully lighter than this, so then the arm magnets will have even less of an issue holding it up. Although now with the stronger magnets, that should be less of an issue anyway. Alright, so let's get to it. well, I guess without realizing it, I threw away more stuff than I thought I did when I did select similar. Thought I was only getting those, didn't pay attention, but I threw away a couple other objects that I did not intend to throw away. So, fortunately, it's easy enough to remake things, but it's generally easier to not have to remake them. Alright, we had something like that. Alright, so the simple idea here is that this chunk will essentially be hollow with slots cut or sections booleaned out to allow these pieces that'll be printed separately, like the medallion and the end chunk, so that it can actually have as little material printed there as possible, still be fully supported, not have to be hollowed by the software, and I should end up with some nice control over how these pieces actually work. Now, I am actually going to go ahead and actually just create the other parts of the handle here in 3ds Max. That way I have complete control over it. There's a couple things about the handle from WattCorp that makes it a little harder to assemble kind of in a perfectly straight line. One section of the handle, for whatever reason, has got almost a ball socket on the end. So if I just essentially remake those pieces similarly, and I don't have that concern, I don't have that problem. I know everything's going to fit together perfectly, and then I know the kind of gap or space that I leave in the handle for the hand will actually be the right size, which is about a 20 millimeter kind of wide hand. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So let's just throw kind of simple material on. Definitely don't want it too shiny, so otherwise it's kind of hard to see anything. Let's assign it to everything. And then real quick, just throw an HDRI to give me some lighting so I don't have to really deal with much of that. I don't know, there's no necessarily good, bad, or anything else image here. They all have good lighting. Not all necessarily the best for what I want. That one should be good, and that's the just preview image. That's the actual HDR. HDRs don't preview in Windows at the moment. Someday, maybe. Once that's in, I can see it in the background. I can see kind of where the sun's going to be, or at least a general idea of it. I don't like it's quite enough lighting actually coming from the HDR, so I'll probably switch that. But overall, the overall feeling of this as an object, I think is pretty cool. Kind of adds more little hosey bits. And again, this is all based off of Adam's design, so I'm just trying to recreate it so that I can print it with a little bit better detail. Rather than dealing with the FDM printer and the cleanup from that. So, yeah, just gonna keep going and adding more little bits and, like, you know, little greebly stuff to make it look like there's really more going on here. Alright, so these pieces are essentially ready to be exported and printed. This is very similar to what Adam originally created. Some very minor modifications, but the piece now can actually be printed in multiple parts to allow it, hopefully, to be significantly lighter. And have much more finished detail that doesn't require any cleanup. So in the long run, hopefully this makes for a cool video and actually saves time from what I would have needed to do to clean up the original piece. Yeah, that's about the size of a person in the Warhammer world. So I think that means we're okay. All of that, I think, is plenty big. That's the space for the hand. Maybe another set of bolts right up there. The spike here is cool. The spike there is cool. I like this. I feel like this is pretty good detail. Alright, so now this whole thing can be printed as a single unit. It'll be stronger, it'll be hopefully perfectly straight. There shouldn't be any issues. There's an issue. All of these bolts would be floating in space. That's a problem. Alright, so let's make sure. Radius is 5 on that one. That. Alright, all those bolts should definitely be embedded now. There's definitely overlap between the handle and that piece, so that'll print as a solid chunk. Space for the hand. Those should hopefully fit the 2 pieces that came from WattCorp. That'll be the only 2 little chunks that I salvage. Everything else here should be good. So let's actually get the rest of this. I can delete that. That was the hand spacing. Just double check. All of this should be the lower handle. Alright, so let's move this off to the side. Actually, let's hide it. Actually, let's just delete it. Don't really need it. So in G2 Box, I have all of the pieces imported and laid out. I believe rotating everything here at about a 45-degree angle to the build plate will help. So if I'm going to go into now my support settings, as it does this, I'm going to look around, and anywhere on the bottom that's highlighted in red is where it knows it needs supports. So the less red that I see on the bottom, the better. So I'm just going to go with medium supports to start with, more like 60% density, and I'm just going to hit the plus all and let it do all of the basic model supporting with some good medium supports. And then I will go through with some light ones and add anywhere that I really feel like it needs just a little bit more. And so for these kinds of things, I'm definitely okay with, I imagine, what a lot of people would consider to be over supporting things. This kind of little stuff, I would much rather have a bunch of little tiny supports to remove. And end up with, you know, an actually successful print. Gonna add a couple heavy supports to a couple spots on the inside to just help ensure that the very bottom of the model is well anchored to the build plate. Now, the fact that I'm gonna get a little bit of essentially kind of rough spot on the model because of that, really, in my opinion, is okay. A couple of these, right, these are all internal, so it shouldn't really matter anyway. But even for something like this that's a bit more external, I would definitely rather have a little bit of cleanup to do and have things stay attached to the build plate. Now I'm going to try to actually get these kind of bigger ones to make sure they're in more of a flat surface. Again, on the inside doesn't matter. Maybe we'll run one heavy all the way up to the top here. Oops, I'm going to actually create, not edit. And having a couple heavy supports, hopefully, again, we'll add a bit more bridging to nearby thinner supports, and also essentially give just everything a bit more to anchor to. Again, we definitely want all of these things to stay connected. The more common, for me, problem I've had with things not actually printing was simply the pieces themselves not staying attached to the supports. So the supports all printed with nothing on them. They all kind of pulled off because there wasn't enough adhesion. So again, I'm kind of living and learning as I go here, and I think this will be good, but you never know. I'm hopeful. All right, so this is the entire Warhammer on one build plate. So let's kind of finish this up. All right, so now I'm going to get that set up in the printer and see what happens. Hopefully I'll be back at the bench in, well, what appears to you to be a matter of seconds. All right, I'll be right back. So after a very successful print, I think, if I remember, it was about 6 hours, 6.5 hours to print the pieces of the Warhammer here. It's funny, it is a Warhammer 4 Warhammer. So each of these individual parts actually came out really, really nicely. Some of the detail in there is really nice. My little skull medallions for on the sides. You won't be able to see it, and you won't be able to tell once it's painted, but there's actually teeth there, and the tiny supports broke off the tiny teeth on the other one. So here is kind of the heart of the hammer head. It's just the simple box that I booleaned out all the pieces from. So then the individual parts, it's the wrong side, nope, that's the right side, fit in, right? So the hammer heads on the ends, and then the medallions on the sides. Everything sits in there nice. All right, that'll go on the top. That'll end up in the bottom. Right, and then that'll go here. And then this section is where the gauntlet's going to be attached and then holding this. So that's pretty crazy. So, okay, so for now, this video is going to be assembling all of this and getting it set up with the arm and magnetized and all that. So, the 3D modeling and printing part worked really beautifully. I'm super happy with the print. There are a couple spots where the model sagged a little during printing, but I really don't think that's in any way going to affect anything. It shouldn't even be visible. Like on the two end caps, it's inside a part that's going to get glued closed. So I don't think it's going to matter at all. It shouldn't affect how it glues up, and it shouldn't be visible. I do wish, in hindsight, that all of the bolts around this section had been a little more pronounced. They're there, but they're not super noticeable. So hopefully they'll emphasize and wash and all of that nicely and still stand out and look cool. All right, so on to building it all up. Yeah, there's no real adjusting of that after that went in. That's gonna have to just be close because it's almost perfectly straight. Now, there's no real need to worry about how this is aligned in any way, so I'm just not going to worry about that. I'm also not going to plug it into the hammer right now. We're just going to kind of leave that till later, because that one I do want to think about whether or not I want those knuckles kind of aligned that way or this way. So not really sure. I think once it's up in the air in his hand, having it on the back. Well, if it's up in his hand, it might be kind of cool if that's kind of hanging down. Well, we'll see. This one, that's set up. So, those pieces are ready to go. Well, I guess I don't need to cap that up. We're going to set that off to the side. I'm not sure if I'm going to use these two pieces yet. We'll see. I'm okay with those being kind of empty sockets. These were a little too big. My sockets were a little too close together. Right, my two little sockets right there. A little too close together, so those pieces didn't fit. So I sanded down one side of both of them to give it a flat spot. And I sanded them just a little too much. So I think super glue would fill it in and it'd be fine once it was painted, but I don't know. I'm not sure that it needs it, so we're just going to kind of leave them off of there for now. Might have to sand that down a bit. Or just leave it off because it doesn't really matter that much. But that's pretty cool. Alright, so now that, based on the orientation of the hand, I think we're going to want that to be pretty close to that orientation. So maybe that means these are actually off at 45. Because somehow these actually have to line up with a kind of logical location there, or it's going to look really strange. Even if he's holding it so that the hammer is at a slight angle or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I think we're going to go with that orientation, so it's on the sides. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Alright, I'm going to let that set up and I'll be back in a little bit to finish up the rest of the arm and get that attached into the hand. And then we're going to get some magnets going. All right, so let's just get the last couple pieces assembled before we move on to the magnets. All right, so with everything ready to be magnetized, I have my magnets marked, right? So as long as I hide the black dots, they are polarized correctly. The thinner gold one, which really is accidentally gold, ordered the wrong one. It's not a bad thing, right? It doesn't matter. That's just gold. So then they go there and there, and everything's good. That one's a little inside. And we definitely want the magnets to be slightly proud, but with everything together, since this magnet is slightly proud on this side, they do actually still have complete contact. So we can go ahead and glue those in. Separate them. Be a bit of a challenge. Black dot in. And as long as we hide the black dot, you should be good. Let those two sit for a moment while I mix up a little bit of epoxy sculpt. I drilled out the top of the arm here just a little bit to accommodate one of the larger, slightly fatter magnets like I put in this end. And it's drilled just slightly unevenly and slightly too deep. So we're going to just fill it up a little bit to make sure that magnet in the upper arm stays slightly proud so that it makes better contact up inside the shoulder. If the magnets don't actually make physical contact, they lose a lot of connective power. I guess I should have actually thought that through. Never really actually thought about that, I guess, or acknowledged the fact that magnets need to really have good physical contact. So some of them have a slight gap, which is definitely making them not work as well. And I definitely started with some of them that are a little light as far as what I'm actually supporting here. So I think those look pretty even. Still slightly more of that. Alright, and that's going to be way too much, but it's really hard to even mix a smaller amount. And make that a little soupy. And then, hopefully, the magnet so what I'm feeling in there is it just seems like this back edge is still a little light because it doesn't want to quite push down evenly. All right, now that's pretty nice. I'll leave the epoxy sculpt for a while to set up, and then I will super glue the magnet in. So I will be right back. All right, so the last thing to do to this arm is going to be to get our top magnet in here. So let's separate that. Just trying to make sure it's set level and as far down as it can be. That looks really good. Should have. So with these two together, I can rotate it, and the magnets are strong enough, tight enough that it does not want to sag. So that's really nice. I'm hoping that the one up in the shoulder is going to be similar, but the magnets on the inside of the shoulder joints are going to have to be replaced. That will be happening soon. Not sure exactly when, but that is the completed right arm and Warhammer for our Acastus Knight. This thing should be really cool once it's all painted up. So thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. All right, I'll see you in the next one.